The plan by Pasminco to buy up to 60 houses immediately opposite the plant was revealed by NBN yesterday. The company wants to create a buffer zone in the 3 streets closest to the main furnace. In that area, ambient lead levels are double that allowed by the Australian Medical Health and Research Council, and it is known that lead in soil tests have revealed dangerously high levels. The plan has been welcomed by some residents who, for the sake of their children's safety, would take up Pasminco's offer.
Our levels here are so very high, and they say that they cannot bring the emissions down to reduce it. It's the only option that's really left for us here, right here on the front line.
Others who've been in the suburb for years, though, say they have no intention of moving. In nearby Argenton, the proposal is seen as favouring a select few. It could cost Pasminco up to $4.5 million to purchase the houses. While residents like Vicky Arneson and Sue West acknowledge there is a problem in streets close to the main furnace, they believe the money could be better spent elsewhere.
Our main aim is to clean up the school at the moment, to stop some of that dust blowing onto the kids' lunches.
Argenton School is very, very barren. We've tried to grow trees up there heaps and heaps of times, and it's just not working. They just keep dying, and lack of water. So I just think maybe they could be doing a bit more up around this end.
The overall results of soil tests taken in the Bullaroo, Argenton and Spears Point areas will be made public tomorrow at a special meeting at Lake Macquarie Council. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
It looks simple, stickers on police cars, but with the limited funding available, Maitland's Domestic Violence Committee is doing its best to draw attention to the problem.
We've started an awareness campaign and we're providing information for women through local libraries, baby health centres and of course police stations. We're trying to increase awareness, we're trying to get women to seek help. It's usually up to mothers to get help and try to break cycles of abuse.
Almost half the state's murders are family related. 1 in 4 are spouse killings. But domestic violence isn't usually so extreme.
It can be implied violence, it can be stopping a woman from having contact with people, it can be financial abuse as well. So men usually, unfortunately it is usually men, abuse their position in the family. Of course, we know that where there's domestic violence, there's often also the emotional, physical and sexual abuse of children.
In a perfect world, parks would be used only for play. But as Steve Gosball could tell you, this world is far from perfect. Most of the street kids that Steve comes into contact with are full of cynicism and hatred due to physical or sexual abuse or just a resentment against society. Before Steve can coax the kids away from life on the streets and back into the mainstream, he first has to break through that cynicism. To do that, he has to earn the trust of the homeless. This beat that Steve walks crosses some tragic paths.
Just recently, young 14-year-old solicited himself for homosexual prostitution in this Islington Park.
But there are success stories. Outside Steve's base, the Mission's Community Centre at Mayfield, the youth worker meets up with one of his contacts, 15-year-old Munchkin, on the streets at 12, on heroin 6 months later, and in prostitution not long after that. Munchkin's life was a mess, and it stayed that way until he got out of Sydney and into the arms of the Hunter Mission.
They gave me some clothes and food vouchers and everything, so me and this guy could get something to eat. That's how they helped me.
Munchkin says he's now off drugs, and as he mixes with some of the homeless veterans, like Ronnie, he's determined to settle down, believing the only future on the streets is no future.
These kids, they've got better futures, they've got better futures, but you know, the older people don't seem to have better futures than the kids. They've got, in one way, they've got better futures than the older people.
How old are you now, mate?
Only 31. No, 32, 33 next year.
Although the Hunter Mission has been operating for only 6 months, it's already having success coaxing kids away from the vicious cycle of street life. But now the mission is working to fulfil a vision a place they can coax the kids to, a home for troubled youth.
We will have a place where we can effectively look at the needs of young people, refer them to appropriate services that we can offer.
The Hunter Mission launched a public appeal today for money to buy a home to realise its vision. While Mr Hogg won't say how much money he hopes the appeal will raise, he's confident the home will be operating early next year. And he's adamant that the cost of setting up this badly needed centre is nothing compared to the social price of leaving our young on the streets.
Young people like that are survivors, and they tend to survive the best way they can. That may mean in park benches or clothing bins, as we often see on reports. It may mean in the juvenile justice system, because sometimes survival means breaking the law.
Scott Bevan, NBN News.
The Parliamentary Committee has been travelling around Australia studying the demise of local shipbuilding. In Newcastle, there was little good news as speakers chronicled the downfall of Carrington slipways.
We witnessed not just the closure of a company, but the closure of an industry.
"420 workers lost their jobs after Carrington Slipways launched its last ship, the Sea Road Tamar, in April. But a study by 2 Newcastle University academics has put the loss far higher.
All those related industries had suffered employment cutbacks as well. But then you can go beyond that, and there was less people buying things in the shops, and the employment multipliers go well beyond that. I would estimate about 1,200 jobs all told.
John Laverick, former Joint Managing Director of Carrington Slipways, also addressed the hearing, criticising the government for lack of support for the shipbuilding industry. Mr Laverick says he's now taken his business out of the country, replying cynically that there seemed little point for any Australian manufacturing to continue, as it could always be done cheaper overseas. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
Troy Waters is the youngest of the fighting family of Kulnura, and already he's had a crack at winning a world title. But a bad car accident resulted in a badly broken jaw, which sent his career tumbling. And because of his forced layoff, Waters was relieved of his Commonwealth Junior Middleweight crown, now owned by Englishman Chris Pyatt. Tomorrow night, Waters fights undefeated Queenslander Chris Singh for the Australian title, and if he is successful, there is moves afoot for Waters to try to regain his Commonwealth belt, which would happen in February of next year. But first things first, and Singh is his main target at the Ettalong Memorial Club tomorrow night.
On the same day that the Public Health Unit released results that showed soil lead levels near the Pasminco smelter were above ideal, the company revealed its $40 million expansion plans for the Bullaroo site.
The company wants to expand. In this day and age, our operation is not particularly profitable, and we need to increase our production.
A residents group called No Lead is opposed to the company's high emissions, but says it would have no objections to Pasminco expanding if it could keep the lead levels down. But with the company already looking at buying up houses to create a buffer zone between the smelter and the residents, No Lead's Stephen Gorton is not confident that safe lead levels could be achieved.
Just by their own monitoring results, they're constantly over their goals, the 1.5 set by the National Health and Medical Research Council.
According to Pasminco, about half of the $40 million earmarked for the upgrading will be spent on environmental measures. But Mr Gorton says the environment needs that money spent now.
I'd like to first see them spend the money and show that they can stay within the guidelines set by the National Health and Medical Research Council. At this stage, they're saying that they're having trouble doing that. I'd like to see them do that first and take it from there.
Mr Gorton says the group has been meeting with the Environmental Defenders Office in Sydney and is considering taking the lead issue to the Land and Environment Court. Concerns about the environmental impact of Pasminco's upgrading plans have also been raised in State Parliament. Lake Macquarie MLA Jeff Hunter and the member for Wallsend John Mills say any increase in output could mean more lead emissions, so they want an environmental impact statement done before any work begins. Scott Bevan, NBN News.
It took just an hour for the fire to travel nearly 2 kilometres from Redhead Beach to the Carl Oval at Belmont. With the heart of the blaze in inaccessible bush, firefighters could do little but watch the growing swirl of flames approach houses bordering the scrubland. It was hoped the northeasterly wind would skirt the fire away from property, including this shop fitting business. But nature had other ideas, seemingly intent on pushing the fire where it wasn't wanted. While firefighters did their best on the fringe areas, a bulldozer was brought in to clear a break between the approaching fire and residences. Householders too did their bit. While a last-minute wind change saved this house from damage, these possums weren't so lucky. With their bushland home destroyed, they were given a safe haven in the nearby tennis court. This is the second time in 8 months that fire has destroyed this area of bush, and it won't be the last. But for the moment, residents can breathe easy.
Mum and Dad will be happy. They're away on holidays, they're up there, they'll receive this. So everything's all right, Mum and Dad. We got the water out.
Santa always seems to elude his followers on Christmas Eve, and who can say they've actually spied a reindeer? But in the midst of this year's shopping frenzy, that's exactly what you can expect to see. 3 small fawns have arrived from a faraway land, Mudgee, to help weave a little extra magic into that Christmas spell. According to their handler, Terry St George, they're so rarely seen in these parts that few actually know what they are.
Yeah, that's right, no idea, mate.
What has caught on are the daily feeding times. To a feeding time of another sort, the Charlestown Meals on Wheels volunteers came in for a well-earned treat this afternoon. It was a thank you party for their year-round giving. The James Street kitchen turns out 19,000 meals a year, Christmas dinner included. And there's only one gift they'd like.
Well, the very best present could be more volunteers for our service.
Carols by Torchlight would have to be another Aussie adaptation, with candles considered too dangerous during fire bans. 600 high school, primary and infant students got together last night at Jesmond to sing along with the Young People's Theatre and guest artists performing the season's favourites.
If Daddy had